then I would say that they're just not using it properly. And for those people who are sitting around getting high all day long, they're abusing the plant emotionally because they don't want to face the world.
Certain conditions where there's a lot of emotional things, the PTSD, the anxiety disorder. This is where, again, a doctor who knows about stuff can help you.
Choose your terpenes, choose your compounds, right? Yes.
Welcome to Season 6 of the Cannabis Truth Podcast, where we speak the language of cannabis freely and uncensored while educating our audience on safe use of this live plant therapy. You should know what's in your cannabis, what's good and what's not, because cannabis does not come with an FDA stamp of approval, yet. The information you will find here comes straight from scientists and clinicians doing the work and reporting their findings in reputable outlets. Hopefully, we can inspire you to research the facts as we know them today. Cannabis is an amazing alternative in health remedies, with the potential to alleviate typical disease problems and troubling side effects, even those caused by synthetic prescriptions. Here now is the host of the Cannabis Truth Podcast. She is a 21st century cannabis shaman, not a doctor, not a scientist. Raised by nuns and wolves in the verdant cattle pastures of the Oklahoma oil fields, here to amplify the truth of this great big story of cannabis in historical, political, scientific, and spiritual terms, so you can make educated decisions about the medicine you choose to ingest. Please welcome Honey Smith-Walls.
Welcome, Dr. Janice Makela, to the Cannabis Truth Podcast. I am just delighted that you could come and share a little of your expertise and some time with this audience. Thank you. Won't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Janice Makela. I was a doctor doing geriatrics and palliative care for about 20 years. And recently, basically when the FDA sort of announced that they might start rescheduling, and I said, oh, I might be able to do this without losing my medical license. I kind of jumped ship, especially as at a point in my career where I was like debating what my next step would be. I said, I'm going to go into cannabis. So I've spent about the last year learning everything I can about the industry, learning kind of where I can best fit in, meeting people, learning as much about cannabis as I can. And so now that I've realized after looking, saying, well, do I start a brand? Do I make my own, what do I do, right? I realized that the number one thing that's needed is education. There is not enough education. Doctors don't know cannabis.
That's right.
Cannabis doesn't know medicine.
That's right.
And patients don't know either.
That's right.
And so there needs to be some more education. So I'm doing two different things right now. One, I am creating a podcast, not actually really a podcast, a live stream. And that's important because it's actually happening live. I need live people there to really make it work best. Obviously, I can talk forever. But it is a live stream, a Q&A with Dr. Makela. And I'm a geriatrician, hospice doctor, and a cannabis expert. So yes, I actually invite people to ask questions about any of that. But not surprising, because it's the thing people know the least about and have the least access to. Cannabis is the most common questions I get about cannabis medicine. And it's a lot more lively when I have a lot of people, when the chat is really active and people are, chiming in and commenting or asking questions. So that's really fun, and I find that's a great way to get information to people. And I've been starting to do it on Wednesdays at 3 on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch, but I'm adding a Thursday. So today is the inaugural 7:00 Thursday evening, because I realized that cannabis, as I was looking at who's showing up, I was getting a lot of in-industry people, who cannabis was their job showing up. I wasn't getting a lot of everyday people who were working. And I'm like, oh, well, A, they're working. B, you know, B, the cannabis is sometimes not safe for work, right? Because some people, it's still illegal. And so their work servers were going to be blocking it or whatnot. Or they might be embarrassed to be like, oh, no, I'm not looking at anything about cannabis. High. Right. And so I've added a 7 p.m. one on Thursdays, and we'll see kind of if I continue to do both of them or if one of them gets more traction than the other. But
they may morph into something even bigger, and
it may morph into something different. I may find that the 3 o'clock is more educating cannabis about medicine, and 7 o'clock is more educating everyone else about cannabis.
Exactly.
Now that leaves the third question about educating doctors. And as a doctor, there's not a lot of doctors in this space right now. I could certainly do it on both fingers, all my fingers, if not one hand, right?
Right.
Of the MDs in the field of note.
Scary, ain't it?
Yeah. And the reason I think is the same reason I took forever to jump is because a lot of doctors have a lot to lose.
That's right.
The DEA says, really starts to slamp down and say, I can lose my DEA license. And as a hospice doctor, that's death to my career.
Exactly.
I'm still a medical director of a very small hospice. But that gives me some time to pursue this.
Yes.
But if I lose my DEA, I can't prescribe medicines, and that's the end of my career. So a lot of doctors, we're very scared of that, type of thing, of the fact that it's still illegal. And I think that really does keep a lot of doctors kind of out of the industry.
It's so frustrating, and it feels like the only way that they are really going to jump in with both feet is if it is mandated from the top down.
If it's legal.
Yeah, when they put it back into the pharmacopoeia, when they put it back into the universities.
Yeah, honey knows.
Hi, Honey Smith Walls here. I'm host of the Cannabis Truth Podcast, weekly for the past 6 years. But today I'm inviting you to a Facebook group called the Holistic Relief Summit, in hopes that you too will come for the peace and stay for the epiphanies. It's a beautiful space for women to find all kinds of relief from all kinds of suffering. Come join us for free.
Well, hello, I'm Dr. Philip Blair, and I want to introduce you to Honey Smith Walls. And she recently had an experience with beta-caryophyllene.
For years, I've been dealing with lots of arthritis pain and pain from neuropathy that has not been resolved through other prescriptive methods. As an advocate educator in the cannabis industry, I learn lots of interesting information about the compounds within the plants, and one of those turned out to be beta-caryophyllene.
What was your first dose like?
I was gobsmacked. Absolutely gobsmacked. It has given me my future back.
I want to get it out to everybody too. I want to get it out to the whole world, as a matter of fact. It has so many mitigating factors for all the stresses of life and pain and diseases. It is unbelievable, the spectrum of care that it can provide.
What, there's 2 universities now that are offering master's courses?
And notice those are master's courses.
Yeah.
We're not even seeing the endocannabinaid system taught in most med schools.
Yes is yet. I know.
Right? I mean, no one's teaching. There is no such thing as an endocannabinoid specialist. While I see this as a future, because I've been here as a hospice doctor, hospice 25 years ago was still very new. It was a lot of doctors doing it as a side gig, or a lot of doctors who were passionate because they saw it, how it helped their patients. So the palliative world where I came out of, we see people, palliative, that's what I was in, but geriatrics, where again, you see a lot of older people, a lot of people who pass, oncology, intensive care, emergency. These were the docs who were saying, yeah, we see people who die regularly, and there needs to be a better way to do this. That's where palliative came up, but a lot of it was docs who were doing it as their side gigs. They were still working as a primary doctor and then doing this.
Right.
And hospice wasn't a medical specialty. It was a program. It was a Medicare paid program.
Right.
So hospice and palliative care did not become a medical specialty until 2008. I actually sat for the first boards. I'd been doing hospice for a year or for 2 years, working at a hospice when I was able to actually grandfather and sit for the boards. Now it's a medical specialty. Now you need to take an extra year of a fellowship after you finish residency, and you can become a hospice palliative care doctor.
Okay.
And then palliative care was this extra idea, right? It wasn't just working at a hospice. It was, we have patients who need this extra stuff. These are people who maybe are going to survive their cancer, or maybe they're not quite ready for hospice yet, but can you do some of that hospice magic where you make them feel better before they go into hospice? And so palliative, or can you talk to them about end of life decisions? Because you do this a lot. And so palliative care kind of evolved from hospice. And I see a future where the endocannabinoid specialist is actually a thing, where it came out of doctors, rubber stamping, or really good doctors who are passionate about it, saying, we want to help you with your cancer pain, and we want to help you with your nausea and your symptoms, right? And the doctors, like the ones you might see at the Society of Cannabis Clinicians or Associated Cannabis,
I'm a member. Love them.
Right? You see some really good, passionate doctors out of there. And so from there, I think you might start seeing it become a little bit more accepted, but it can't be anything until it's medically, federally legal, right? The other thing is the endocannabinoid system exists whether cannabis does or not. Right?
Yeah, right. Not everybody.
right. Whether there's no cannabis, we still have an endocannabinoid system. And it's this part of medicine that's been really neglected, which is a shame, because at the risk of sounding like some sort of like alternative, way far out there
woo-woo
medicine,
girl, right?
Right. The endocannabinoid system hasn't really been taught, but there's a lot of research, primary research about it, that shows that it's in our liver and our kidneys, our pancreas. Is it our kidneys? Well, pancreas. It's pretty much in every organ.
DNA, it's in our eyeballs.
The heart, the skin,
it's everywhere.
And the brain. And so a lot of the things that are chronic diseases, our obesity, our diabetes, our heart disease, our neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, are all seem to have connections. Even mental health things like schizophrenia, these things that have really weigh on our medical system are tied to the endocannabinoid system. And personally, this is where I think like an ECS specialist would be more than just cannabis. Cannabis is this part of it. People who have a broken ECS, or people who increasing the ECS tone can help them. But there are people who have too much endocannabinoid tone. And they're
Are you familiar with Dr. Ethan Russo? He was a real good friend of Raphael Mechoulam.
I've talked to him a couple times, but nothing in depth.
So wonderful.
Yeah.
He preaches that the endocannabinoid system is a master regulatory governing all the other 11 bodily systems that we have. And he also says, hypothesizes that humans have an ECS deficiency now because it was ripped out of our diet for the past 100 years. Hence, we have more Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, ADHD, seizures, autism, la 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 la. So
It's interesting.
yeah,
There's a handful of people in the PhD realm who do the research on this type of stuff. There's a gentleman, Stefan Braslid, in Sweden, who does a lot of primary research on the ECS system.
Larson?
Braslid. Yeah. Stefan Braslid out of Sweden.
Braslid, right. Okay.
Yeah, he does a lot of things on that. And him and a handful of other people I've talked to believe that actually a lot of us in America have actually too much ECS tone, or it's mistoned. We so often like to think of things in dichotomies, like cannabis cranks it up and, something else might be bringing it down. But really, it's like three-dimensional, it's this pulls this pulls that, this does this. And hopefully I'm not making any weird, it's levers, right? It's so interconnected. And so as a result, I think what happens is that interconnection means that it's not just that cannabis cranks it up, because it might actually crank it down in certain areas, right? It might modulate it in certain things. So it's not just a simple up and down. It makes it easier when I say it's broken and cannabis can fix it. But honestly, there are things, and this is where that point goes to. There is in the food we eat omega-3 and omega-6 and omega-9 fatty acids. And this blew my mind. This is like where I feel like I'm suddenly on the verge of pseudoscience, but like there's like a million articles that actually say, no, it's not pseudoscience. It's just we're not taught this. And then, of course, anytime a doctor says, medicine doesn't teach you this, it's a big red flag. But I'm like, no, it really is. Because there's, and it really actually integrates with traditional medicine when you think about it. Because traditional medicine will tell you don't eat a lot of, they actually tell you what to eat. What to eat is the Mediterranean diet, right?
Oh, yes.
And the Scandinavian diet, they've expanded it. My personal bias from working in a lot of Latino communities in Chicago area is that I call it the Mexicaterranean diet. I have to find a better word because that comes out really. But the Mexicaterranean diet is traditional Mexican food, not Tex-Mex, certainly not Taco Bell, right? Yeah. But the traditional cuisine of someone who grew up in Mexico, where it's very heavy in whole grains and avocado and fresh fruits and vegetables and beans, right?
They're little people for a reason.
Right. And in those, even in Chicago, U of I did a study about a lot of things. They looked at health disparities and everything by race in Chicago several years ago. Mm-hmm. And they found that Latinos lived longer than anyone else. And it was completely paradoxical to everything else. Access to healthcare and stuff. But working in the city, one of the things I saw was every Latino neighborhood had a Latino grocery store. And every Latino neighborhood had 90-year-old abuelas shopping at those grocery stores to buy vegetables for their vegetable soup, right? For their caldo, right?
Yes.
And so that those abuelas, right? And I think there's something to be said because most of those abuelas grew up in Mexico eating very whole foods, but then brought that with them to the States and continued to cook and eat that way. And I think there's something to be said about the traditional Mexican diet being able to hold its own with the Mediterranean but no one's done that research. But I think I think Japanese diet has a similar thing, so there's a handful. As we kind of expand these principles, we see there are certain diets where people live much longer on it. And one of the things that apparently is in common is a preponderance of omega-3 fatty acids in the diet. So the Scandinavian diet had a lot of fish and flaxseed.
Right.
And then omega-9 fatty acids, which were olive oil and avocado oil, right? Again, Mexican cuisine with the avocado and, the Mediterranean with the olive oil, that those oils actually work on the endocannabinoid system and actually modulate it. And not in just some little foo-foo thing. I mean, they change in our body to chemicals that then interact with the CB1, CB2 receptors or downregulate it. Omega-6, and it drives me a little crazy because you're going to get the seed oil people who are like, ooh, seed oil's bad, right? I'm like, this is the grain of truth behind that. And again, as a doctor, I try to say, okay, this is true. There's some truth in there. The truth is this: omega-6 seed oils. So that's a lot of your sunflower, safflower, even canola. But but you see, here's the thing. It's a scale. So canola has the least amount of omega-6 of all of these seed oils, but then flaxseed and hemp seed has the complete opposite. They have more omega-3 than 6, right? So it's not just all seed oils. That's just way too simplistic. There's a scale. Some have more than others. The omega-6 oils, which then are present in a lot of heavily processed foods and are added to, actually directly get a turn to, I believe it's actually anandamide it gets converted to. So it gets converted to, I don't think it's 2-AG. My brain is frying for a second and I forget which one it turns to. But the point is, it turns to an actual endocannabinoid, one of the chemicals that our body actually uses. In fact, it's essential. We need omega-6. Again, why the all seed oil people are a little bit wrong. But there's this ratio between 3 and 6, that fish oil, that it needs to be balanced, which is everything we know about the endocannabinoid system, that it's all about balance.
That's right.
So the 3, and in the American diet, we have a ratio of 1 to 25 of 3 to 6, whereas it's understood that for a perfect balance, it should be 1 to 1 or 1 to 4.
Mine's 1 to 25. You know what that's called? A Southern diet.
Right?
Right.
Exactly.
Gravy, chicken fried steak, mashed taters with tons of butter and salt on it.
Right.
With butter on it. Yeah.
And then of course you get people who hear this and say, oh, let's just make everything in beef tallow. I'm like, wait, that's the wrong direction.
Right.
And now when they've done studies, and this actually solves an odd paradox, which is data shows that omega-3 versus omega-6, that, you can take fish oil supplements. Now, when I was pregnant, my doctor said, take fish oil for the baby. I took fish oil and definitely did. But because it's good for the brain and good for brain development. But what they've done studies on taking fish oil for heart disease is they could not find the data, except for the extremely, extremely high doses that you see in Visipa, the prescription brand, where you're taking giant doses of it compared to just the amount you might normally eat. I mean, even in a healthy diet, like a Mediterranean or Scandinavian diet, very fish-based, you're taking just giant amounts of the prescription version versus the, what you might take. But what they found is people who eat fish, right? When they do population data, they say people who have fish twice a week, that's where that guideline comes from, have less heart disease. But when you say, let's have fish oil supplemented, they never found that. And now it kind of makes sense because you're talking about this balance. So what when you have fish twice a week, what aren't you doing? You're not having a meal that's full of omega-6.
Exactly.
If you're having an omega-3 rich meal, you're not eating an omega-6 rich meal. So you're also lowering the amount of omega-6 you're eating.
Yeah.
That's why we see that in the research. It suddenly is like, again, it's not going against common medical knowledge. It really kind of integrates with it nicely. But
did you say, I just have to check my hearing with you. Did you say that omega-6 converts into anandamide or 2-AG?
I believe it's anandamide, yes.
I'm just still reeling over that little factoid.
Right. I mean, and so my Dr. Bracelet over in Sweden there, like I said, he's a PhD who does a lot of research on the ECS system itself. And he personally believes, and actually, I think he makes a really good case for it, that the endocannabinoid system, because of that, too many people have too high of an endocannabinoid system, and it's promoting inflammation and vascular. That's why the heart disease stuff, And I'm like, okay, that kind of jives with what we know. Again, as I said, the Mediterranean diet and why fish oil works as a diet, but maybe not as a supplement unless it's a super high dose. And probably the super high dose works because it's counteracting for the super high amount of, that's in someone who's still taking processed foods on a regular basis full of omega-6. And so it has to balance by having a high amount,
But as you have proven, this is an incredibly complex plant and system coming into our incredibly complex system.
Right. And so the plant itself, what's weird is, that's why I said it's not as simple as up, down,
right,
as we'd like to make it, because here's the thing. Yes, the plant gives you the munchies, but data after data shows that people who use cannabis actually tend to be thinner. They tend to less likely that. Now it's a little bit.
Is that because it makes them feel better and gives them a little bit of energy, and they feel motivated to get up and move their body, and maybe not so hungry for this or that if they're using the right cannabis?
Well, it could be. It could also be just that metabolism is a lot more complex than we give it credit for. Yeah. At the end of life, as a hospice doctor, I see in metabolism, you can get some paradoxical metabolisms. At the end of life and at the end of dementia, at the end of cancer, at the end of a lot of different diseases, people stop eating, right? And
right.
The family is like, oh my God, they have to eat, right? But what we've seen is there's a difference between what's called cachexia and what's starvation.
Yeah.
So starvation, both are not eating, but in starvation, your body goes into hunker down mode. It's like calorie, right? And so it turns down the metabolism and it grabs every single little calorie. That's why starving, outside of trying to lose a couple pounds for a dress for a special event, is not really a good long-term way to lose weight, right? Starvation diets usually, don't work. Cut down your calories significantly. People will eventually gain it back because your body just, gets every little calorie can. Cachexia is you are actually burning calories you don't even have. You're not eating, but your body's in this inflammatory state of burn. We're trying to save ourselves. Burn every muscle, burn everything, because we need this energy to live. So this kind of hyperdrive. And so people are burning calories they don't even have, but because it's kind of a fight or flight or something like that, people also don't eat. It's the sensation you get when you've had the flu and someone says, have this chicken soup I made for you. And you're like, just let me sleep. I just want to eat, And so that kind of, my point is metabolism isn't so cut and dry as I have the munchies, I eat, therefore I gain weight. Because we see in cannabis, people have the munchies and they're hungry, but they're actually losing weight. And I think that is part of what understanding ECS can help us unpack. That's why I personally think learning about the ECS can help us understand obesity better. It can help us understand diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
There are medicines, pain, the inhibitory pain pathway is ECS. Sorry, as I go off on my science geeking here.
I love it. I love the sciencey stuff.
But the whole reason I learned about it was, well, two things. Well, first was the inhibitory pain pathway. As a palliative doctor, I was given a lecture on pain, and I wanted to do something on the neural anatomy of your pain and like where opioids actually work. And so I did a deep dive, as I'm apt to do. And I did a deep dive, and I found that the inhibitory pain pathway starts with the CB1 receptor. And more than that, Tylenol actually works by the endocannabinoid receptor. In fact, when I gave a pain lecture, the first question I asked is, what medicine do we use for pain that activates the endocannabinoid system? And what's the most common medicine for pain? And, it was like cannabis. I'm like, nope. Tylenol. Tylenol works by the ECS. There's even pioglitazone or rosiglitazone, which were diabetes meds that we don't use that much. Pioglitazone still is in the market. Rosiglitazone got removed because it caused heart problems.
Oh.
And pioglitazone acted on the PPAR receptors, which, as you probably know, a lot of the cannabinoids act on. It's not the receptor for cannabis, but it's like a cousin receptor that can interact with it. And
thanks for explaining that to our audience too. That's important.
Yeah, and so it's very interesting. So a lot of our meds actually do play on this. COX-2 inhibitors, ibuprofen, the COX-2 and cannabis talk to each other. Endocannabinoid system talk to each other. There's a lot of interplay, and so knowing about this can expand what we know about medicine, and it already goes with what we know. It just kind of fills in the blanks a little bit instead of having, the classic example was Tylenol. In med school, I was taught, it's like, we kind of know it works sort of by the COX-2, but we don't because it's not anti-inflammatory, and we don't really know how Tylenol works. And then in the early 2000s, really, data started to show that it was tied to the ECS. So the ECS doesn't contradict, it's medicine. It just plays nicely with it. It just kind of fills in some of these gaps that we've had in our knowledge, And so anyway, that's my lecture on the ECS.
I love that you have a goal of helping other doctors understand this so that they too can begin boning up on it.
Right.
And helping their own patient load.
And that's the thing is that, first of all, there's the ECS. Now, to be honest, one, we need to know a little bit about it. And two, it just kind of fills in stuff we already know. And the more research is done on the ECS, I think the more we'll find about stuff. Big pharma, you're missing out. Research the ECS. Second, the doctors need to know that even if their patients, even if they're like, I'm not a cannabis doctor, I don't prescribe it, I don't do the little rubber stamp,
That's
I don't
fine.
believe, right, it's illegal in my state, whatnot.
That's okay.
Your patients are still using cannabis. You have to know how
And they
it
still have an
interacts.
ECS.
Yeah, you need to know the ECS, and you need to know that cannabis acts on certain people. So if you're in a situation where the ECS, is broken, the rat model of MS has a broken endocannabinoid receptor. They make the rat model by breaking the endocannabinoid receptor, the CB1 receptor, on rats, and that's how they test MS stuff. That just tells you that, people with MS have broken endocannabinoid systems, so it's not surprising that giving someone with MS cannabis makes them feel better and helps their pain. That giving someone with MS,
Right to me.
right?
And I'm a doctor, but it's very frustrating to learn these things and realize that 99.9% of our medical professionals in the U.S. and even around the globe know nothing about this, simply because of the shenanigans of politicians and big corporate assholes that took it out of our lives.
Correct. And I know, like I said, I've heard some people say that it's the name, just the name. We call it the endocannabinoid system. If we had called it the master regulatory system, perhaps people would be researching it better now. And again, you do see a lot of primary research in it, but we're not seeing a lot of transition to medical stuff yet.
Yeah.
Of saying and you're starting to see a little bit out of the cannabinoids to say, oh, look, this cannabinoid THCV is getting a lot of love, but there's a lot of still a lot of ways to go in this. So that's why I say I do see a future. It's not yet where endocannabinoid specialist is a medical specialty. Right. But it's not yet. Until then, I want to teach doctors. So I'm in the process right now of creating courses.
Good.
For doctors.
Good.
And I'm not talking like God bless. I think Dr. Russo has like a 20-hour course.
Oh, I know.
To get your certification, to say I am, that is what the endocannabinoid specialist will be,
Right. I took Dr. Sulak's courses, and they're like that too. Dustin Sulak of healer.com fame. And
and I love both of them. I'm not saying I've never,
Great.
But what I mean to say is the courses I'm making are shorter. They're shorter. They are not designed for someone who wants to go and, manage the ECS for someone, or manage even be the cannabis doctor who's like, okay, I know this, you're going to take CB this, and you're going to take this terpene.
Right.
I'm not going to get into that degree of detail. It's going to be, this is what doctors need to know.
Exactly.
This is what you need to know to help your patients. Drug interactions,
right.
Obviously, right?
Right.
When is it an addiction versus when is it someone using it every day because they need it medically?
Right.
Right. If someone's using it every day to get through them to their PTSD, that may not be a bad thing.
Of course not.
Right. But I also would say that you have to be careful, because like that person using for the PTSD, they could be doing one of two approaches. They could be doing it very healthy and saying, I'm using it for my PTSD to get me through the day. Right. But then, and to help me live my life. Yeah. And then there's the person who might be using it to hide. Right. And to get so toasted that they don't have to think about anything in their life. And that's maybe maladaptive. That's not a health, or to avoid having to do therapy, because in PTSD, cognitive behavioral therapy, or EMDR, is proven to be extremely helpful. So you can use cannabis in a helpful way, in that you can also use it in a harmful way, and so there can be, same thing with anxiety, same thing with some of the conditions. Even I saw an interesting study, migraines. A lot of neurologists now swear about cannabis with migraines. But there was one study that kind of caught my attention. It was in a migraine clinic, I want to say. I don't think it was a cannabis clinic. It was a migraine clinic of people who were self-treating with cannabis. They weren't necessarily using someone to guide them and to say how much to use. They were self-treating for their migraines. And there was in that population of people self-treating, there was a fairly high prevalence of people who, when they were asked, is this impacting your life and your work, and all these really high stake things that you don't want to see, to suggest that you've actually crossed into like cannabis use disorder, where it's impacting your life and your personal relationships and stuff, that it wasn't huge, but there was a notable number of people who were taking doses that were starting to get in the way, where it became like fear of, if I stop taking it, I'm going to get a headache. And so
which is normal in my opinion. I have to medicate all day long to manage my own aches and pains and anxiety and arthritis and neuropathy. And if I have to use cannabis all day long, I'd rather be using that. And yes, if I stop using cannabis, I'm afraid I'm going to have hideous pain. So I'm not going to stop using cannabis.
And that's what I'm saying, though, is there's a difference between someone. It was actually a lesson I learned in residency about 30 years ago. I'm aging myself here. When I had patients, when I was working in the sickle cell, and back in the day, there was this terrible drug called Demerol.
Oh, yeah.
And Demerol was highly addictive, not very good for you, but it was very effective. And we would get a lot of people with sickle cell. And the question is, are they in pain or are they addicted to Demerol? And, you're like, okay, but their blood pressures, you were always second guessing. Is this someone who's faking their symptoms? And which is an extremely judgmental thing to say, first of all. But second, I had an attending who had actually a very good take on this. They said, are they using it to live their life? Or are they living it to use?
Intention is
In
everything.
and they're taking these high doses of pain pills, of these opiates. It's people with sickle cell. And for those who don't know, sickle cell can be excruciatingly painful. And it can cause even secondary pain. Even when someone's not in a crisis, it can cause avascular necrosis of the femoral head, which is the hip joint, literally dies. And it is excruciating. So there are certain situations with sickle cell that can be extremely excruciating. And
it's not going to get better.
It's not going to get better. And so to take these medicines to help, if you're doing it and you're living a good life and you're like, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to go to work, or even if I can't go to school or work because I'm too disabled, but I'm going to live my life to my best of my ability, and these medicines let me do that, then that's good. We shouldn't be in judgment of that. But if someone is, as we saw with the whole oxy epidemic, right? If someone is using it and to the expense of their life, to the expense of their relationship and any job and anything and any, and their own health and well-being, to the point that they're overdosing and hurting themselves, right? That is a completely different creature.
And they build tolerance real fast and want more and more and more, but
they want more and more and more. And so it's the difference between using a medicine to live versus using living to use a medicine.
Right.
And so I've always kind of viewed things as a palliative doctor, but even in the cannabis world through that framework.
But the OxyContin is going to get is a physically addictive compound, and cannabis is not. Cannabis is not physically addictive. It may be a little emotionally addictive.
It's emotionally addictive. I think there are some people who get kind of scared of the cannabis headaches and stuff, but generally speaking,
then I would say that they're just not using it properly. And for those people who are sitting around getting high all day long, they're abusing the plant emotionally because they don't want to face the world.
Again, some things, certain conditions where there's a lot of emotional things, the PTSD, the anxiety disorder, it's really better to be, this is where, again, a doctor who knows about stuff can help you, right?
Choose your terpenes, choose your compounds, right? Yes.
You don't want the doctor who just goes, here's your medical card. Okay, don't tell me anything. Because, of course, then the other thing is, what do? You go to the dispensary and
let the bud tender sell you the highest high.
Right. And it's like, wait, no. I literally had a geriatric patient who had dementia. And there's some data out there to show that it can help with behaviors and dementia, where the family said, and they didn't ask me. I might have been able to steer them right. But they they said, yeah, we went to the dispensary and got her some gummies to help with the behavior, see if she would help her rest a little bit more at night. And the poor lady, I have no idea what dose they gave her, what dose they sold her, right?
What was in it?
The lady slept for a day and a half. Yeah. Needless to say, the family never gave her any more gummies.
Of course not. Unfortunately, they didn't know how to titrate or start low and go slow.
And
they had no fundamental background.
And a bud tender who's selling the high THC is like, well, gee, here's 10. 10 seems low.
Yeah. And my granny uses these. She liked these.
Right. Exactly. And so you cut it down to, and a lot of times a frail patient, I would say start at 1.25.
This is why we microdose, to find our sweet spot. This is educating the patient to use the plant properly. It's not like taking a pressed pill 3 times a day.
You've been listening to another Cannabis Truth Podcast with 21st century cannabis shaman Honey Smith Walls. Using cannabis mindfully as medication is a different concept in Western healthcare philosophy, specifically over the past century. There's a lot to learn and reconsider. The scientific truth of cannabis is finally getting out and is wide open for all to see at respected medical sites like the National Library of Medicine at pubmed.gov and the Journal of American Medical Association at JAMAnetwork.com. We here at the Cannabis Truth Podcast are right there in the thick of it, alongside the titans of medicine, as a fly on the wall. We are not doctors, nor did we go to medical school, but we have taken dozens of private cannabis courses and still engage in continuing education offered by expert cannabis scientists. Over the past few years, we slowly began to see and understand the bigger picture. Now we hear from people all day long about cannabis. It is so important to use verifiably safe products. The process of getting a diagnosis from your family doctor and taking your records to a cannabis specialist can lead you to the correct cannabinoid therapy for your specific issues. Otherwise, you're simply your own guinea pig looking for answers without the foundational knowledge or ability to determine your best strategy. To find a qualified cannabis expert in your area, visit cannabisclinicians.org. This is a national society of cannabis experts. Look for the link in the show notes. Unless otherwise proven by a reputable third-party lab test, please regard all street weed as contaminated. It may do grave harm to a patient with a delicate immune system who already has inflammatory issues like arthritis, IBS, fibromyalgia, or worse. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope you find value and understanding through the conversations you've heard on this podcast.
A quick shout out to Nathan Pierce and Daniel Rome of the 406 Budcast and their brilliant tech goddesses who created what you're about to hear next.
She walked in with wisdom and a fire in her eyes, talking plant truth where the silence lies. From the roots to the bloom, she saw the light. Now she's teaching folks how to heal it right. Not afraid to challenge the tale of lazy myths and a system that failed. She's got science in one hand, stories in the other. Lifts up the voices they tried to smother. Honey knows, honey grows. Truth in the soil and love in the smoke. Speaking for the elders and the ones left behind. She's the shaman of the leaf with a warrior's mind. Yeah, honey knows how the healing flows. From Florida sun to digital waves, she's breaking down fear with every word she says. Cannabis truth, that's her battle cry. For the mamas and papas still scared to try. She ain't selling hype, she's serving facts. Taking big pharma to school with tradition, she lights the way for the lost and the curious every day. Honey knows, honey grows, truth in the bud and peace in the dose, teaching the plant like a sacred art, from the ECS to the beating heart. Yeah, honey knows. Lifted by the plant, giving voice to the ones who thought